Gary DeMar is an American writer and lecturer. He has written several books on Christianity. He is also the president of American Vision, which is a non-profit organization. The vision of American Vision is to restore America to its biblical foundations. He also hosts a podcast called the Gary DeMar Podcast, and on that was an episode where he criticized antinatalism. Gary combined religion, politics, ethics, and philosophy all together. I'm only going to focus on his criticism of antinatalism. For his other views, you can check the link in the description. In the latest episode titled To Have Children or Not to Have Children, Gary compares two articles published in the World magazine. One is Baby Fever, which covers pronatalists like Malcolm and Simone Collins, and another article in the same World magazine in the same issue of February 2025 called Extinction Event. That article covers antinatalists like Amanda Suknik, Lawrence Anton, Theophile DeGrode, and philosophers like Mati Hairi and David Benatar, among others.
The extinction event people, of course, are generally atheists. This is the end of the article on page 81. It says, for many antinatalists, this philosophy is the last stop on the there is no God train, the logical outflow of a worldview where human life is an accident of science. If there is no God, then there really is no reason to keep bringing new people here, one particular antinatalist says. Life has all kinds of great stuff in it, but it comes as a tremendous price.
That one particular antinatalist was Amanda Suknik, whom he is quoting.
And I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Why It Might Be Okay to Eat Your Neighbor. If atheism is right, can anything be wrong? And so we begin to see the implications of atheism as there's no basis for anything in the world today, that everything is in fact an accident.
So he is saying that if you are an atheist, then you cannot have any basis for morality or ethics. And I'm using these words, morals and ethics, interchangeably here just for the sake of argument.
And as this person writes, an accident of science. Science isn't a thing. Always people bring up, they use the word evolution did this or evolution did that, or science does this or science does that. There is no such thing as science per se. There's no entity called science. It's not something that you can package. Science is what people do. And the same thing is true for evolution. There is no such thing as evolution. It's a designation we give to a process that people claim came about spontaneously.
I agree with him on the point of science. Science is just a description of how the world works. You can use the description to predict how the world would work in the future, but the phrase accident of science is figurative here. Let's take laws of motion. We can say that inanimate objects follow Newton's laws of motion. What we mean by that is that Newton's laws describe how the object moves and how it follows a certain trajectory. We don't mean that there is some Newtonian lawyer sitting somewhere who is dictating how the objects move. There might as well be a sky daddy lawyer somewhere doing this, but we don't mean it when we say that objects follow Newtonian mechanics. Same is the case with the phrase accident of science, and same is also the case when we talk about evolution or natural selection as if they have some kind of intention. This is actually basic limitation of language, and I'm surprised that scholars like Gary DeMar are not considering it.
But the idea that there is no God, people are irrelevant, and we are just simply an accident of nature. And the first question I asked was, okay, so if this is all true, that humans are the problem, then why don't you then just kill yourself? And sure enough, as soon as I turned the page, this is what I read. And this person writes, you get a lot of people who tell you to kill yourself, actually, because they somehow equate not having children to killing humans. And my question is, within the atheistic worldview, why not? There's no basis for morality within the atheistic worldview.
That's actually not true at all. Firstly, being an atheist does not mean that you can't have any morals. That's because being an atheist does not automatically mean that you don't value anything. You will suffer in life whether or not you believe in God, and you will still have empathy for suffering of others even when you are an atheist. Secondly, if you need a sky daddy looking upon you to follow certain moral principles, then Are you really a moral person? I mean, if a thief is not stealing just because police are watching him, then he's not acting on the basis of morality, is he? If you don't steal even when nobody's watching you, then it could be said that you have some moral basis. I remember, in early days of my veganhood, my mother used to offer me dairy products like, chocolate or butter, and she used to say, have it when nobody's watching. That is how Gary's argument sounds like.
Richard Dawkins made this particularly clear. Here's what Dawkins wrote in one of his early books. He says, in the universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, and other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. And so when this individual states that because they somehow equate not having children to killing humans, well, again, who says it would be wrong to kill humans?
Gary is confusing between the description of how the world is and how we ought to live in the world. Richard Dawkins' description that Gary is quoting is just a description of how DNA and genes work. And the theory of evolution is a description of how we got here. But both of these things don't tell us how we ought to behave. These are not prescriptions to follow. They are just descriptions. Here's directly from the horse's mouth.
I think it is important to remember that although natural selection does explain why we're here, it doesn't provide us with a recipe for how we ought to behave necessarily morally or politically or anything like that.
No.
And if the problem is humanity, the logical outflow of a worldview where human life is an accident of science, and the world would be better off if, in fact, human beings did not exist, then why not just begin the process of getting rid of them?
The logical outflow of the worldview that human life is an accident is not that we should get rid of humans. It is also not that the problem is humanity. The problem is suffering, and once you realize that there is no God or cosmic meaning, then it becomes hard to justify this continuation of cycle of suffering. Generations upon generations of beings who will suffer and die to serve what purpose? But that does not mean that we should start killing those who already exist. Those who already exist have an interest in continuing to exist. But those who don't yet exist have no interest in coming into existence because they don't exist. And that's why not bringing new children into existence is different than killing already existing people.
And again, now, given the implications or the development of Darwinism, evolutionary manifestation of life on the planet, hey, humans could evolve again from the animal creation. So you'd have to wipe out everything to ensure that human beings did, in fact, were completely wiped out.
That's a very human-centric perspective. There are some invalid assumptions made here. One, antinatalism is only for humans. This is not correct because other animals are considered within antinatalism of various shades. Two, it is assumed that other animals don't suffer until they evolve into humans or human-like beings. Other animals suffer too, and that is why David Benatar has actually said many times that his arguments of antinatalism apply to all sentient beings and not just to humans.
Now, these people are they are insane. There's a fellow, Lawrence Anton, who is an animal rights advocate from the UK, who became interested in antinatalism after overhearing a discussion about it during an exchange program in Sweden. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, he's animal rights? Aren't human beings animals? That's the evolutionary premise.
Well, exactly. Humans are animals and other animals suffer too. And so antinatalism is a compassionate position across the boundaries of species. So congratulations to Lawrence for being consistent.
And then it goes on to something like this. This is the logic of these people. Since sex without consent is rape and work without consent is slavery, antinatalists view birth without consent as an equally great injustice, and they see the inherent gamble of life as simply too great. Once again, on the basis of what? Their sex without consent is rape. the evolutionary worldview teaches that we got here by rape. In fact, there was a book written about this, The Natural History of Rape. Rape is natural in an atheistic worldview. There is no morality. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. There is at the bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference.
Gary is taking leaps upon leaps. Someone in our ancestry raped someone, and we would not have come into existence otherwise. And from that, he jumps to say that it means that there is no basis for morality. A rapist ancestor could have also been a Christian or some other religion. Actually, if you consider the fact that we have known about evolution for like 200 years, but our ancestry goes back to hundreds of thousands of years in history, there is a very high chance that one of our great grandfathers who actually was a rapist was also some kind of a God believer. Does that make rape okay in Gary's Christian worldview? And if not, then why is he making these accusations to those who agree with the theory of evolution? The point is that evolution, natural selection, sexual selection are all descriptions of how we got here. And DNA and genes and their behavior just describe how our biology functions. That does not mean that you can't have any morality. In fact, morality is something you do despite the limitations put up by the evolutionary forces.
And so what we have here are individuals who are borrowing some moral capital from the Christian worldview and are applying it to a secular premise that has no basis in fact in terms of their own worldview. And so this is just a kind of a strange thing going on here, where another person says there's absolutely no reason for human beings to keep perpetuating suffering. So according to these people, life is suffering. It's all about suffering as they drive around in their automobiles with air conditioning, who can just go to the store, plunk down a couple of money or a credit card and buy all kinds of food to live on. To enjoy sports, music, and art and everything else.
There was no need to caricature this. Some people have better lives than others, but that does not mean that they don't suffer. No matter how much money you have, you would still suffer. That includes minor inconveniences like having mild headaches once in a while, or ordinary frustrations like, being stuck in a traffic, or bigger dangers like having cancer or lifestyle diseases, relationship problems, failures in professional life, and eventually a certain death. Even when you're enjoying pleasures, most of the times you have to be deprived of those pleasures before you can really enjoy them. Like to really enjoy some good food, you have to be hungry first. And once that desire is satisfied, you quickly move on to the next deprivation.
And we're just perpetuating suffering. Is there suffering in the world? There absolutely is suffering in the world. And what has happened because of the Christian worldview, the goal has been to try to eliminate suffering as best we can. And that's hospitals were built by Christians, not by atheists, not by people like this, who would say, hey, just let these people die.
This is again a lie. Many hospitals are built by secular governments, and many doctors are atheists too. But the main point is that hospitals won't be needed to start with if antinatalism is accepted. Hospitals try to solve a problem, but antinatalism is preventing the problem from occurring in the first place, and prevention is always better than cure, like quite literally. Anyway, he goes on further to describe the pro-natalist article Baby Fever and has other religious and political content. I won't go into that, but just one last thing that he talks about having children.
And of course, the people who will win in the end are the people who have children.
They will win what? He's talking like there is some generational trophy to win and we are all in the race to get it. This is not winning. This is just continuation of cycle of suffering and death. At the end of it, there are no winners. They are only losers who lost their lives to death, and in the process they suffered. And you don't have to be atheist to recognize this. There have been Christian sects in the past who were persecuted for recognizing this. By the way, this concept of winning through procreation is borrowed into the religious worldview from the theory of evolution. This is not specific to today's Christians. There are Muslim clerics who are now saying this. Listen to this.
Stockholm is less than 1 million, right? And in Stockholm, if you have 10% Muslim, I was in the city of Malmö. Malmö is spelled with an O, but it's pronounced Malmö. And they said that if the Swedish population maintains its negative and the Muslim population maintains, Muslims have, mashallah, the average of what, 5, 6, 7 kids, right? The average, mashallah, that's for secret weapon, I say. That the prediction is, this is the halal secret weapon, guys, huh? So don't worry, take the video and miss it. Halal secret weapon. It's not our fault we have more kids, guys. You want to do whatever you want to do. It's all halal, alhamdulillah. So if the projection continues, I was told by one of the local councillors there that within one generation, it is very likely that this city will almost be half Muslim. Because this city is just not there. The locals are not reproducing. It's not our fault. I mean, it's not, I don't know why they're getting irritated at us. It's not our fault we're having kids, right? So
this is wrong politically because you're talking about invading another country. Moreover, you're talking about invading a country which helped you get a good life. Secondly, it is wrong because it then radicalizes the people from the host country as well. They can use these events for their politics of division. But this is also wrong from an ethical point of view. You're viewing your children as a weapon to be used for your ideas. And it is your fault that you're having children and putting them in the harm's way. If you are a Muslim and if you love other Muslims, then you would not create more Muslims into this harmful world. You would not create a possibility for them to die and suffer in hell for eternity. We all saw that Russia passed a law banning what it calls as child-free propaganda last year. And more recently, a woman was fined $500 because she did not delete her social media posts which were talking about being child-free. Now the news is that the Ministry of Defense in the UK has tweeted that the Russian leadership's attempts to increase the birth rates are highly unlikely to arrest Russia's declining population in the short term. They also define what unlikely means. Looking at this chart, highly unlikely means that there is only a 10 to 20% chance that Russia will be unsuccessful in reversing the trend of birth dearth in the short term. On a related subject, Lawrence did 2 videos this week. One was on the event that happened in Russia where a woman was fined $500 for not deleting social media posts about being child-free. Lawrence also talked about Russian authorities extracting DNA samples for such activities. And the second video was on companion animals. Whether or not, as antinatalists, we should let our companion animals to reproduce. He goes into different aspects of this, like ethical aspects, the practical implications, and also some objections for not letting our companion animals to reproduce. His main point, however, is based on guardianship. We are guardians and custodians of these animals. And from that relationship, he derives his position, which actually made me wonder if this can be extended beyond just companion animals. What do you think? Can it be extended further? If you think so, then let me know in the comments. And if you think that it cannot be extended further beyond companion animals, then also let me know in the comments as to why you think like that. Sophieophilia is a philosophical channel. He makes a lot of good philosophical videos. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says, but the quality of his content is very good. He recently made a video on consent, deprivation, and the badness of death. David Benatar has said that life is bad and death is also bad. And he doesn't mean that just process of dying is bad. What he means is that the state of being dead is also bad for the one who is dead. The reason for that is that when someone dies, from that point onwards, they are deprived of all the things that they could have enjoyed otherwise. This deprivation starts at the moment of death and it lasts infinitely. This is different than Epicurean view. On Epicurean view, when you are alive, when death has not occurred, then death has not deprived you because death has not occurred. And when you are dead, you don't exist, so you cannot be deprived. Therefore, death is not actually bad for the one who is dead. So these two contradictory views about badness of death are based on deprivation. Sophieophilia proposes a view from violation of consent instead of deprivation. He says that when someone dies against their will, that is violation of their consent and therefore death is bad. But whose consent is violated? Sophieophilia restricts that only to rational beings, meaning only to those beings who have some kind of moral agency who can decide what is right or wrong for them. Based on this, he draws 3 conclusions. 1, it is not wrong to painlessly kill somebody who is not a rational being. 2, if David Benatar thinks that the state of being dead is a deprivation, and if it was possible to bring back the dead to life, then that will have to be a good thing. Sophieophilia thinks this is against antinatalism. And 3, we cannot violate consent of rational beings, even if for some situational reasons they can't provide that consent. A channel called Spiral Vent made a video about antinatalism being not that extreme. I think he has a point. He says that in case of abortion or family planning, there is this sentiment of not bringing an unwanted child because the child would suffer otherwise. I agree to a certain extent, but not fully. David Benatar's asymmetry is based on the values that we already have, and so it is not surprising to see that we can see antinatalism at the core of so many aspects of our lives. Sumit from Bengali Antinatalist did an outreach about antinatalism, but this time the subject was a little different. On 9th of August 2024, a 31-year-old postgraduate trainee doctor was raped and murdered brutally in the city of Kolkata in India. Her genitals were mutilated and her neck and face was injured. She was then strangulated to death. In the antinatalist outreach that Sumit had this time, he tried to convey a message that these cruel incidents are actually preventable, implying that these are preventable by not having children. There was a short interview of David Benatar published by the Oxford University Press about his book, The Human Predicament, and that was in 2017. By the end of 2024, Polish translation of that book was published. The translation was done by Patryk Gołębiowski. And so on the similar lines, Patryk also translated David Benatar's Oxford interview in Polish. This is excellent work. We want Benatar's work in more and more languages. And so thanks to Patryk for doing this.